even still, it has changed.
Doesn't, of course it's changed. I agree with that, but that's not the issue. I'm
So
saying
let's say
that
you
in
were
Chutz
in
La'aretz today, when most Jews
Okay, so let's
live
say
in
you're
countries
Iran.
where the climate and the
understand.
requirements are totally different,
But what I'm saying is,
all the big poskim, the major poskim, such as the Rambam and the Rosh, and the list is very long, all say explicitly that you should be saying these bakashot and tefillah and birkat hashanim according to the climate and the realities of the country in which you reside.
okay, but
And that's what I believe is the halacha, even though that's not what is the common practice.
Let's say you were in Bavel now. When would you say it?
Then I would, then I would,
60 days
then I.
after Tkufa, or December 4th and 5th before leap year?
It's but the lashon of Chachamim is to say it's Shishim Yom mitkufat Tishrei. So they themselves are telling me what to do. They're telling me you find the tkufa and you count 60 days, and that's exactly what I would do.
Okay, so you would not do the 4th and 5th. You would.
There's no kedusha in the 4th of December or the 5th or the 6th or the 7th of December. The psak halacha of Hananiah, Ahi Rabbi Yoshua, who went from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and is the first chacham who enunciated this halacha, which is later given a halachic seal of approval by an Amorah called Shmuel. He said that you say the bakasha, you begin to be shoel geshamim in Bavel, specifically in Bavel, not in France and not in Spain and not in America, but in Bavel and countries with similar climates to Bavel. You begin 60 days from Tekufat Tishrei. I would therefore discover what is Tekufat Tishrei according to the astronomical realities and add 60 days. That's what I would say. Yes. Why would anyone think that there's any specific kedusha or reason to go by a date which you know is not 60 days from the Tekufa?
Well, it's similar to pi. Halachic pi and regular pi is different. Regular pi is 3.141592,
etc., etc. And the other
halachic pi
is an approximation.
is 3. So you see that the approximation has a kedusha. That being the case,
only where it doesn't make a huge difference. But if you, I would not kill anyone based on that.
Well, okay. In other words, Hilchah Shabbos, right? Hilchah Shabbos, Hotzah. Hotzah on Shabbos.
Yes.
The Gemara says you use 3, the approximation for pi.
Because he couldn't express it in any other way that would have been understood or practically applied at that time. But if today we had to discuss such an issue of Sekila because of some halacha on Shabbat, then I would say that we have to, and the halacha is that you have to define the circle, etc. Then I would say you would go by the most precise value for pi that you could arrive at. And certainly in Dinei Nefashot, we should be mekel in that direction rather than mechmir in the other direction. So I believe. But rather than discuss something such as you just asked now, which is really not practical at the present time, not about to stone anyone tomorrow for carrying, and I might mention in passing that I completely reject the eruv, as is commonly practiced.
So it is no good.
Yes, but there's still no Dinei Nefashot because we haven't got a mikdash, for amongst other reasons, of course. I think we should be discussing other issues, such as when you and other Jews like yourself intend to come to Eretz Yisrael and finally get real. Isn't that a more pertinent question than asking me on what day would I say 10 Talmud Torah if I happen to live in Baghdad? Or to ask me what would you do if someone moved something this amount of distance outside on the street tomorrow at 10 a.m. on Shabbat? These are not pertinent questions, and you know they're not. But the question of whether Jews who live in America, Torah Jews who live in America, for that matter all Jews who live in America, should be in America or should be in Eretz Yisrael, that's a much more pertinent question. I think you know the answer. The Torah's answer. The Torah's answer, the Jews belong in Eretz Yisrael. And the longer Jews vacillate and delay in making this taking this decision and making the move, the longer they are holding up Klal Yisrael from achieving its purpose on earth. And that to my mind is a pertinent question.
Okay. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with? Final thought?
There are many things I could say, I suppose. Did you want to say something or point something out?
I don't know if you want to say it. I'd be willing to say it. It doesn't have to be for me on video, but I think that a pertinent thing that would be of interest to Rabbi Hoffman is, obviously I have no idea to what extent how Rabbi Hoffman has reacted internally to what you've said, but I imagine that there still might be a feeling that that Machon Shilo constitutes a new movement, a revolutionary movement in the history of the Jewish people and in the history of Frum Judaism. I think that there's a good question that could be asked as to, don't we need to fear that any new movement could lead Jews astray? If it's not already leading Jews astray, of course that might be the assumption of Rabbi Hoffman. But isn't there a danger that a new movement could go the way of the conservative movement, which now recognizes homosexual rabbis? Couldn't go the way where other movements, other than Chabad, the Chabad heretical movement, what is to in other words, what is to differentiate you from the chidush that the original founders of the conservative movement may have been trying to do in order to move in a different direction? I think he might be interested in the reaction to that.
Well, first of all, the reform movement which began in Germany over 200 years ago, and the conservative movement which began in the United States, I believe, sometime later. The real question is, what was the true aim of these movements? And maybe it's difficult to answer, because there were different individuals involved, and perhaps they didn't all have exactly the same aims. But it seems to me a fair generalization to say that both these movements...
Let's also add a third movement.
Okay.
Traditional movement. When Reb David Weiss Halivni left the Jewish theological seminary, the conservative seminary, he kind of started a new movement.
I heard about this, but I don't know a lot about it. I've heard of it.
So would like to throw that one in too.
All right, well, I don't think that's a very widely known movement. It's something fairly new. I don't know very much about it myself. I do know that he left JTS at some point, and I have an inkling as to why. And in his position, I would have done the same, I'm sure. However, the reform movement in Germany over 200 years ago, its clear aim, above all other aims, was to enable Jews in Germany at that time to become fully fledged members of German society. And in order to achieve that aim, which is of course not a Torah aim, it's a German civic aim, but it's not a Torah aim, in order to achieve that aim, they're willing to do basically anything that needed to be done. And that's exactly what they did. To some extent, the conservative movement, the reform movement in the U.S., and also the conservative movement later in the U.S., were also aspiring to something along those lines, each after its own understanding. But the essential problem of all these movements is that they were not aiming to do the simple thing, and that is to ask themselves the question: what does Hashem want? Does Hashem want Jews to live in Germany with full rights, and does Hashem wish Jews to live in the United States with full civic rights and political rights, or does Hashem wish the Jewish people to return to Eretz Yisrael and reconstitute the Jewish Commonwealth here in Eretz Yisrael? That's the question. And these two movements, for obvious reasons, did not address these issues because that wasn't on their agenda. Their agenda was something different, and by definition it was a non-Torah agenda. Whether this or that statement or position of a certain rabbi, reform or conservative, at one point, in 1 year in history, was correct or incorrect is not really the issue at all. The question is, were they trying to further